Three people whose lives became inexorably entwined dominated this sad tale. Oliver Holbrook, a charming local businessman; Taylor Tanner, a committed elementary school teacher; and Claire Reeves, a newcomer with a dark past. Their fates clashed in a perfect storm of desire, envy, and dishonesty, resulting in the deaths of two and the permanent transformation of the third. Born and reared in Millbrook, Oliver Holbrook was the only child of Robert and Elizabeth Holbrook. Oliver showed signs of success from an early age. His father, a well-known local attorney, taught him a powerful work ethic and relentless drive. He learned social grace and charm from his mother, a former beauty queen turned socialite. Oliver was outstanding in academics and athletics growing up, along with being president of the student council and valedictorian of his graduating class. He was captain of the high school football team. Oliver studied business and economics when enrolled in an Ivy League university following high school. Oliver Holbrook, though, had another side that few others noticed. A benevolent smile and effortless charm belied a calculated intellect and an obsession with control. He was a brilliant manipulator, adept at spotting flaws in others to benefit himself. Oliver viewed interactions in both his personal and professional lives as transactions, always seeking what would benefit him. Oliver is never content, even with his accomplishments. Oliver's constant need for validation and attention manifested itself through a string of romantic relationships. He was considered a ladies' guy, and he left a trail of broken hearts behind him. Oliver started to feel the urge to calm down, at least visibly, when he neared his mid-30s, though. Having a wife would help him project more respectability as a pillar of the community and a decent businessman. Under this kind of thinking, Oliver formed relationships with Taylor Tanner and Claire Reeves. In Taylor, he found the ideal Mrs. Holbrook. From a decent family, she was beautiful and well-liked. By contrast, Claire stood for enthusiasm and passion, a secret pleasure he had no intention of giving up. Oliver had no idea that the very women he believed he could control would cause the collapse of his neatly created universe. The girl next door was Taylor Tanner's model. Raised in Millbrook, she was the middle child in a family of 5, with 2 older brothers and 2 younger sisters. Her parents, Michael and Linda Tanner, were neighborhood stalwarts. Her mother volunteered often at the nearby animal shelter, and her father was the much-loved family doctor for the village. Warmth and stability defined Taylor's early years. The Tanner family was always busy, full of laughter, and the smell of her mother's home-cooked food. Raised in a loving environment, Taylor developed into a sympathetic and caring young woman, always ready to lend a listening ear or a helping hand to those in need. After earning her degree, Taylor found work at Millbrook Elementary School, teaching 3rd grade. At a local charity event to raise funds for the school's new library, Taylor first met Oliver Holbrook. His confidence and charm ignited her natural attraction. Their courtship resembled a captivating romance straight out of a fairy tale. Oliver coursed Taylor with extravagant gestures, unexpected weekend trips, opulent gifts, and romantic dinners at upmarket restaurants. For Taylor, who had always lived a quite modest existence, the attention was sedative. Believing she had discovered her soul partner, she sank profoundly in love. Arriving in Millbrook like a breeze, Claire Reeves's enigmatic past and seductive presence shook the sleepy village. Unlike Taylor and Oliver, Claire was an outsider, having grown up in a sequence of foster homes all around New York. Her early years were turbulent and lonely, events that helped her to become a complicated and sometimes erratic adult. When Claire was 3 years old, her teenage mother, struggling with addiction, placed her in foster care. She moved from one house to another for the following 15 years, never staying long enough to create close relationships. Claire's fleeting life left her deeply afraid of abandonment and in immense need for love and acceptance. Despite the difficulties of her background, Claire was quite brilliant and aspirational. She was a shining student, turning her academics into a haven from the tumult of her personal life. Her scholastic prowess finally earned her a scholarship to a famous New York City institution, where she studied psychology. Claire spent many years working as a marketing executive in Manhattan following graduation. Her personal life was a sequence of fleeting, turbulent romances. Although her job was successful, every failed romance left her need for connection more empty and desperate. Claire chose to leave the city behind and start over following a particularly difficult breakup. She used the meager inheritance she received from a previous foster mother, who had shown her great compassion, to buy a small cottage on Millbrook's outskirts. The town's bucolic appeal and the prospect of a quieter life drew Claire. When Claire first arrived in Millbrook, the residents noticed right away. Her big city sophistication and dazzling appearance set her apart in the little town. Working as a consultant for nearby companies, she used her marketing knowledge to enable their growth. During one of these advisory roles, Claire first met Oliver Holbrook. They attracted one another instantly and electrically. In Oliver, Claire found achievement, consistency, and the promise of love, all the things she had ever wanted. She let herself dream of a happy ending for the first time in her life. She persuaded herself when Claire and Oliver started their covert romance that she had at last found her place in the world. She pushed herself into the connection. But the disclosure of Oliver's involvement with Taylor would quickly undermine Claire's brittle sense of safety. This betrayal would set off all of Claire's most intense anxieties and insecurities, hence starting a sad series of events that would permanently alter the town of Millbrook. Oliver, Taylor, and Claire's lives become ever more entwined in a convoluted web of desire, dishonesty, and jealousy as summer changed to fall in Millbrook. Oliver, always the deft manipulator, gently negotiated his relationships with both women, giving each just enough love and attention to keep them engaged. Oliver became Taylor's committed fiancé. He had great plans for their future together. He charmed her family at Sunday dinners and attended local events by her side. Taylor reveled in their involvement, eagerly revealing details of their upcoming wedding to everyone who would listen. In the meantime, Oliver's meetings with Claire took place in the shadows. They met at Claire's remote cottage or in out-of-the-way eateries in surrounding towns. Oliver showered Claire with the passion and ferocity he had gently restrained from Taylor during these fleeting moments. Always with the proviso that he needed time to manage things with Taylor, he fueled Claire's dreams with hazy promises of a future together. Tension between Taylor and Claire started to develop over the course of the many weeks. Taylor stayed ignorant of the actual nature of Claire's connection with Oliver, but the two women frequently found themselves at the same neighborhood gatherings. Claire's presence always took Oliver's eye away from his fiancée. Sensing the newcomer's loneliness, Taylor, trusting and naive, first tried to befriend Claire. She unintentionally gave Oliver and Claire more chances to cross paths when she invited Claire to girls' nights out and to community events. Driven by her affection for Oliver and tormented with regret over turning away Taylor's nice gestures, Claire grew more explosive. Her actions ranged from barely hidden animosity to overly devoted attention to Taylor. The residents of the community noticed these mood swings and began to speculate about the cause of Claire's apparent instability. Oliver watched the two women's increasing conflict from a mix of satisfaction and fear. He delighted in the thought that two attractive ladies were vying for his attention while simultaneously worrying about his well-crafted double life collapsing. The situation grew more uncomfortable as autumn went on and Oliver and Taylor's wedding date neared. While Taylor stayed blissfully ignorant of the tempest building around her, Claire's demands for Oliver to leave Taylor became more frequent and frantic. None of them knew, though, that their activities over the next 6 months would destroy Millbrook's tranquil facade and irrevocably alter their lives. Oliver and Taylor's wedding came on a clear October morning. The whole town of Millbrook seemed to be there, packed into the lovely white church to capacity. With her face glowing with love and happiness, Taylor, brilliant in a classic white gown, walked down the aisle on her father's arm. Oliver stood at the altar, clearly the image of a contented groom, but those who knew him well would have seen a flutter of anxiety in his eyes, a strain in his shoulders that betrayed his calm front. His mind strayed to Claire as he said his vows, pledging to love and treasure Taylor for all eternity. Unknown to the contented couple and their visitors, Claire was outside the church, invisible but near enough to hear the ceremony. Every expression of love and loyalty emanating from the structure seemed to her like a knife to her heart. As the church bells rang to mark the end of the wedding, Claire felt something inside her shatter. The entire town was thrilled to celebrate the marriage of two of the most cherished people. Surrounded by friends and family, Taylor danced and laughed. Oliver performed his part, always the sweet and attentive new husband. Oliver did, however, discover his mask, sliding as the evening progressed, and the champagne flowed freely. More than once, Taylor caught him with a concerned look on his face. Gazing off into the distance, he kissed her quickly and smiled dismissively when she inquired what was wrong. Tin cans clanging behind their car and well wishes echoing in their ears, neither of the newlyweds could have predicted the terrible turn their life was going to take. Claire Reeves was quietly plotting her revenge. Claire Reeves descended into a hole of gloom and preoccupation in the weeks following Oliver and Taylor's wedding. Oliver had ripped away her dream life, leaving her feeling betrayed and thrown aside. Years of desertion and instability had already harmed her frail psyche, but her grief and rage started to split it. Claire initially hoped to move on. She immersed herself in her profession and accepted more consulting assignments than she had ever undertaken. She tried to interact, accepting invites to neighborhood events and local meetings. However, constant reminders of Oliver and Taylor's happiness surrounded her. The newlyweds were the buzz of the town, their cheerful faces seeming to mock Claire at every turn. Claire's actions grew increasingly unpredictable as her suffering intensified. Her once perfect appearance turned messy as she began to show up late for meetings or skipped entirely. Late at night, worried neighbors found her straying the streets, murmuring to herself. However, Claire's growing obsession with Taylor truly marked her descent into madness. She began stalking the young instructor, tracking her to and from the office, and observing her house from a distance. Claire persuaded herself she could win Taylor back if she could just figure out what made her so unique in Oliver's view. Claire's cottage grew to be her obsession's temple. She tore pictures of Taylor from local newspapers and printed them from social media walls, trying to put every element of Taylor's life and her relationship with Oliver together. She produced detailed timelines and diagrams. Claire's dreams darkened as weeks stretched into months. She began to imagine situations in which Taylor disappeared from the scene, paving the way for her to recover Oliver's affections. These were initially innocent fantasies, such as Taylor moving away or deciding she didn't love Oliver after all. But gradually, Claire's ideas began to revolve around murder. She investigated several techniques for hours, carefully weighing the advantages and drawbacks of each with a dispassionate, almost professional accuracy. She developed several strategies, each more complex than the next, always cautious to disguise her tracks and set alibis. Throughout this period, Claire maintained irregular communication with Oliver. Their meetings were brief and progressively acrimonious. Claire alternated between frigid charges of betrayal and urgent calls for him to leave Taylor. Growing uneasy with Claire's passion, Oliver started to remove himself without knowing of the perilous path her infatuation had taken. Winter's arrival over Millbrook set Claire's intentions in motion. She had decided on a staged hit-and-run accident that would leave no evidence of her participation. In her distorted mind, She had convinced herself that removing Taylor would benefit Oliver just as much as it would benefit her. She truly believed that she would be freeing him from a miserable marriage. He was stuck there. Claire stood in front of her mirror the night before she intended to execute her lethal plan, hardly able to identify the wild-eyed woman staring back at her. A brief frown of uncertainty passed through her. But when she remembered the sound of wedding bells and the sight of Oliver kissing his bride, her will grew once more firm. Taylor Tanner Holbrook left her house for her usual run on a dreary Wednesday morning in February, exactly like she had done innumerable times before. The streets were calm, most of Millbrook's people still curled up in their cozy beds. Taylor was a riot of color amid the gloomy terrain, with her brilliant yellow running gear and bouncing ponytail. Unknown to Taylor, Claire Reeves was waiting, her heart thumping with a mix of anxiety and expectation. Her hands tightly gripped the steering wheel, and her knuckles had become white as she sat in a stolen automobile at the end of a quiet stretch of road. Claire inhaled deeply and turned the key in the ignition as Taylor's shape emerged from the mist. The following few seconds were a flurry of screaming tires, a muffled yell, and the terrible thud of collision. Working on autopilot, Claire rapidly turned away from the incident, leaving Taylor's crumpled body on the side of the road. 1 hour later, a jogger found Taylor. By then, it was too late. Despite the paramedics' best efforts, they declared Taylor dead at the scene. Like wildfire, the news tore throughout Millbrook, leaving the town in astonishment and bereaved. Claire's arrangements seemed to be flawless in the short aftermath. The police first handled the event as a sad hit-and-run accident. Claire had painstakingly scheduled her alibi, ensuring she was spotted at a 24-hour cafe in a nearby town, both before and during Taylor's death. Oliver presented a convincing show of loss when he learned of his wife's death. He cried freely at the funeral, relying on friends and relatives for comfort. He was a sad widower, trying to accept his loss. However, as the initial shock faded and the investigation delved deeper, the facade began to reveal flaws. Detective Lisa Montague felt there was more to Taylor's death than just an accident, according to the case. She delved deeper and began to uncover the intricate web of connections that led to this tragic event. Claire stood by, torn between feelings of regret and a sense of victory. She had succeeded in her goal. Taylor left. Oliver would clearly be hers now. However, as the days passed and Oliver stayed far away, had she stumbled upon a terrible error? In the weeks following Taylor's death, a cloud of grief and mistrust enveloped Millbrook. Once amiable neighbors now watched each other cautiously, wondering if a killer lurked among them. Detective Montague's investigation rocked the neighborhood. Oliver Holbrook continued to play the bereaved widower as she conducted interviews with Taylor's friends, relatives, and acquaintances. He made emotional appearances on local news outlets and provided a sizable reward for information that resulted in Taylor's killer's arrest. Under Taylor's name, he pushed himself into charitable activities, building a basis to assist local educational projects. Claire, meanwhile, battled to keep her cool. Her actions brought her immense shame, manifesting as panic attacks and insomnia. Driven by fear that a police knock on her door would come every day, she followed the news of the investigation religiously. Detective Montague dug deeper into Taylor's life and began to discover contradictions in Oliver's account. In the weeks before Taylor died, several witnesses observed him fighting with her. Financial records revealed substantial, inexplicable withdrawals from their joint account. The investigator also focused on Claire. Her erratic conduct in the months before Taylor's death had not gone unreported, and her newfound peace in the aftermath begged questions. Claire's alibi appeared perfect under interrogation, but Montague suspected she was hiding something. Claire's first excitement at having eliminated her competitor started to wane as winter gave way to spring, replaced by increasing anxiety. Following Taylor's death, Oliver had not hurried into her arms in accordance with her expectations. He had actually grown more aloof, dodging her calls and justifying his cancellation of their scheduled appointments. Frustrated and perplexed, Claire chose to face Oliver in his workplace after hours. As she approached the building, she saw a light on in his window. Looking inside, she discovered Oliver in a close hug with a woman she did not know. The sight sent Claire whirling. Her world fell around her. At that instant, Claire felt the full weight of what she had done. She had murdered an innocent woman and destroyed numerous lives, all for a man who had never truly loved her. The awareness was terrible. Guilt and rage overwhelmed Claire, who rushed into Oliver's office, catching him and the unidentified woman off guard. Claire then let years of pent-up anguish and resentment explode in a furious confrontation. She said Oliver was using her, manipulating her emotions to get rid of Taylor. Oliver, displaying his well-manicured front-breaking skills, did not refute her accusations. Rather, he told Claire coldly that she was no longer needed and had fulfilled her function. Should she fail to leave Taylor's life permanently, he threatened to reveal her role in his death. Desperate and shattered, Claire left the office while her head whirled. At that moment, Claire realized the true extent of Oliver's influence and her own grave mistake. As she drove home in a stupor, Claire was unaware that someone else had witnessed her conflict with Oliver, a person who would soon initiate the final act of this tragic drama. Olivia Chen, a bright young attorney who had recently joined Oliver's company, was the woman Claire had seen with him. Oliver's appeal and the promise of career advancement had drawn Olivia into an affair. Unlike Claire, Olivia, though, was not ignorant of Oliver's actual character. Olivia had hidden herself in an adjacent room on the evening Claire confronted Oliver, listening to every word of their furious argument. Oliver's participation in his wife's killing shocked her cold with horror and revulsion. Olivia discovered she was struggling with moral conundrums in the next few days. Despite knowing she should report what she had discovered to the police, her own role in the affair and fear of professional consequences held her back. Her disgust deepened as she watched Oliver carry on like a bereaved widower. Driven to find the whole truth, Olivia started her own secret inquiry. She painstakingly went over Oliver's emails and papers, gradually putting his degree of dishonesty together. Her findings exposed a years-long network of fraud and manipulation that went much further than Taylor's murder. Olivia became more determined with every fresh discovery. She knew what her responsibilities were. Equipped with her evidence, Olivia visited Oliver in his office late one evening. She compiled all she had found, from his mistreatment of Claire to his dishonest business methods. Realizing his circumstances were unstable, Oliver tried to seduce and threaten Olivia into silence. Nonetheless, Olivia was ready. She had surreptitiously videotaped their whole exchange, catching Oliver's unconscious guilt admission. Oliver erupted as she was about to depart, intending to present her evidence to the police. In a sudden surge of panic and anger, Oliver attacked Olivia and attempted to seize the recording device from her hands. Oliver was unaware, however, that Olivia had arrived prepared, haunted by Taylor Tanner Holbrook's destiny. In the chaos, Olivia reached into her purse and retrieved a small revolver. One shot burst forth from the vacant office building. Oliver Holbrook, the man who had controlled so many, slumped to the ground, indirectly killing his wife and wrecking Claire Reeves. Olivia stood over him, a mix of disbelief and grim satisfaction on her face, the burning revolver still in her fingers. Olivia coolly took a seat to wait for the cops. As sirens cried in the distance, she knew her actions would have repercussions, but she also knew the truth would at last surface. The period of dishonesty under Oliver Holbrook was ending. Oliver Holbrook's shot echoed around Millbrook, starting a series of events that would eventually highlight Taylor's death's whole truth. While Olivia Chen was under arrest, the actual scope of Oliver's manipulations began to unravel. Oliver Holbrook's death brought fresh relevance to the inquiry into Taylor's murder. Equipped with Olivia's data, Detective Montague began to put the whole picture of events over the past year together. Racked with shame and anxiety, Claire Reeves at last collapsed under interrogation. She admitted to her part in Taylor's death and gave a thorough narrative of her activities and motives. Her testimony painted a negative picture of Oliver's manipulation and the extent to which he had orchestrated the events leading up to her wife's death. Claire received a life sentence in jail after admitting to Taylor's murder. Olivia's situation was more nuanced. Despite her conviction for manslaughter, the circumstances surrounding Oliver's death led to a reduced sentence. Years to come would bring memories of the sad story of Oliver Holbrook, Taylor Tanner, Claire Reeves, and Olivia Chen, a sobering reminder of the darkness that may hide under even the most beautiful surfaces.